Hello and welcome to this training on FCAT EOC prep using Gizmos. My name is Corey Peliquin and I'm a project manager with ExploreLearning and the School District of Hillsborough County. I'll be guiding you through this training. At the conclusion of the training, should you have any questions or need additional support, please reach out using the contact information on your screen. Whether performing this training independently or within a PLC, please take a moment to look over the professional norms on your screen in order to participate, grow, and develop as a professional. I'll give you about 15 to 20 seconds to read over these professional norms. There are a variety of handouts that are available to you electronically that pair with this particular training, and they are housed on the Hillsborough ExploreLearning Gizmos resource page. The web address to get to that page is located on the bottom of the screen, which is www.explorelearning.com/Hillsborough. Three documents that you may be interested in downloading or printing is a self-help introduction to Gizmos, which will help reacquaint you with the functionality of your ExploreLearning Gizmos account. You'll also find a manual to guide you through the process that we're about to take from beginning to end. And the title of that manual is Creating a Gizmos FCIM Using Achievement Series. On the Hillsborough resource page, you'll also find FCAT and EOC prep materials and resources such as PowerPoints and documents to help in preparation for those particular high-stakes assessments. This is an example of the Hillsborough's ExploreLearning resource page. You'll find those how-to guides and the manual by clicking on the self-help and how-to resources icon. And the FCAT and EOC prep resources you'll find under the respective content area, such as high school math, high school science, or middle school science. One document that you will need in order to complete the first part of this training is the FCIM benchmark planning tool for FCAT or EOC prep. This is a PDF that you can find either on the Hillsborough resource page or you can also find through First Class within your content areas conference. I shall also mention two other things. Since this is a video, if you need additional time to carry out any of the tasks or additional time to reflect, or simply needing to stop because of interruption, feel free to pause and then when ready to resume, continue the video by pressing play. Also, in order to complete the first part of this training using Achievement Series, you will need to use a school district computer or be hooked into the district's network in order to access Achievement Series. Unfortunately, you are not able to access the data within Achievement Series from a home computer. With those pieces in mind, let us begin. We'll start by having a brief conversation about how research validates this idea of using student assessments in order to drive instruction. Harry and Rosemary Wong first identified that schools exist and teachers are hired for one reason only, and that is to help students learn and achieve. You see, learning has nothing to do with what teachers cover, but learning has to do totally with what the student accomplishes. How do we know what they accomplish? A test tells you if the student needs corrective help, and we know that if students do not receive that corrective help or remediation, learning gets worse as the year progresses. Formative tests are used to determine what remediation should look like and what remediation is needed for a student to master the content, skills, and objectives set forth by the curriculum. So in order to help students reach the highest possible level of achievement, the effective teacher, you, at the front of the classroom, are constantly assessing for student learning. This helps students go where they need to go, and it helps them determine what or how best to get there. Spence Roger, another well-known educational guru, has claimed that when what we teach aligns with how we assess and evaluate student progress, the students do better. So our pacing guides, our curriculum guides, and the formative assessments that are given are all timed in sequence in a particular order. To assess is to gather information using specific criteria in order to determine what changes we, as teachers, need to make to improve performance. Summed up nicely in the book Working on the Work, improvement can occur only when the thing to be improved can be brought under control. Control is not possible without understanding. Finally, assessment is critical to that understanding. Teachers who are serious about improving what students learn in school must be just as serious about improving the state of their own intellectual development as they are about their own technical skills. Thus, we started by establishing professional norms, and you're carrying out this professional development to gain or sharpen skills. The biggest takeaway is this. When teachers regularly and collaboratively review assessment data for the purpose of improving practices to reach measurable achievement goals, something magical happens. That is, student achievement. So let's look at the agenda, which is broken down into 4 short segments. We'll start with a mini lesson on accessing data and reports using achievement series. You'll then have the opportunity to analyze your benchmark level data for each of your class periods, looking for trends or similarities. When you're ready, you can pick back up with a video to learn and discover a variety of resources that ExploreLearning Gizmos have already created for you in support of continuous improvement and remediation. And finally, in the last piece, we'll wrap all this up together by setting forth the goal of creating a continuous improvement action plan for remediation over those lower performing benchmarks that you've identified, both for FCAT and EOC prep, but also for semester exams. At this time, please open an internet window or internet web browser and navigate to the web address that you see in red. This web address is http:// the word tiny, T-I-N-Y, url.com / EL, the word gizmo, Gizmo, CP. If you need additional time, go ahead and pause the video to navigate to the web page. You will know that you're in the proper place when you see the orange and black ExploreLearning logo across the top of the page. On this page, it's going to ask you for some basic information like the workshop date, which is probably already populated. For the workshop location, feel free to enter your school or office or home, wherever you're completing the training. For the type of training, you'll want to go ahead and select FCAT EOC prep using Gizmos. And underneath, we'll have all the information that's pertinent to you. It's going to ask you first name, last name, loss and ID number, school email address, the training location, the school location or building will be your school that you're assigned to. And finally, it's going to ask math or science and what grade levels. When you're finished with this page, go ahead and press the submit button and you'll be ready to move on. Again, if you need additional time, go ahead and pause the video, and once you've completed this sign-on, you can then resume the video to pick up. Hopefully you've had success with logging in and registering. That way we can offer in-service points for your efforts of professional development. We're now going to navigate away from the page that it's brought you to on your internet web browser window. So no matter where you are, go ahead and click in the address bar at the top, and we're going to navigate to the website www.achievementseries.com. Again, that's www.achievementseries.com. Once the page populates in your internet web browser, look for the staff login button and go ahead and click on it. By clicking on the staff login button, this will bring up the administrative login screen. There are 3 pieces of criteria that we'll need to enter, and for each one of those, I've put specific information at the bottom of the screen to help guide you through. I'll also tell you what that is verbally in case you want to work between different screens and just listen and fill it in. We'll start with the site ID. We're going to need to start with the number 29 for the site ID, followed by a dash. And now you'll need to enter the 4-digit school code or site code for your particular school that you're associated with. In my example on the screen, my school code or site code is 0041. After you've entered your 4-digit school or site code, you'll need to follow that with another dash and 4 zeros. Next, we'll move on to the staff ID. This is relatively easy because you use this every day to sign on to the computer with. So whatever you use for your username to sign on to the computer with, you'll go ahead and enter that in the staff ID. Now there are some exceptions, but basically as a rule of thumb, this is what your staff ID should be. Lastly is the password. The password is going to start with a capital A, and then you're going to follow that with your Lawson ID number. So if my Lawson ID number were 123456, my password would therefore be capital A 123456. Once you have these 3 pieces of criteria entered, go ahead and press the login button to gain access to Achievement Series. So you now should be within the Achievement Series portal. Across the top, there are a variety of buttons starting with Home, then Classroom, District Reports, District Tests, Performance Tests, so forth and so on. At any time as we're going through this process from start to finish, if you feel lost or need an additional assistance in terms of a visual, just look for the orange arrow like you see here on this screen. This will tell you where you need to be clicking on in order to move from screen to screen. So as the orange arrow is indicating, we're going to start by clicking on Classroom off of that top navigation bar. Once I've clicked on Classroom, I'm then going to follow the tabs across from Classroom Tests over, and I'm going to click on District Gradebook. Since the formative assessments, semester exams, and other assessments that are typically given pre-post are made at the district level, that's where they are housed. They're housed within the District Gradebook tab. Once you click on District Gradebook, you'll then see a drop-down box which will have a variety of classes that you teach within that box. Now there's 2 pieces of information you should know. Starting with the very right-hand side of those numbers, that number on the extreme right-hand side indicates the class period that you're teaching that class. So in my example, 04 in blue on your screen, that would be period 4. The next set of numbers over that either says 01 or maybe just 1, or 02 or the number 2, that represents semester 1 and semester 2. So depending upon when the assessment you are wanting to look at has been given, semester 1, semester 2, you'll need to also choose according to the appropriate semester. Let's go ahead and using the drop-down box, let's select the first class that you teach. It may be period 1, otherwise if you have planning during period 1, you'll most likely pick up with period 2. Now, for middle school science, it's recommended if you teach grade 6 and grade 7 to use your semester 1 exam. And if you teach 8th grade, to use your formative assessment. That may be formative A, formative B, or it could be formative 1, formative 2, depending upon what it's called. In the high school science realm, you may be interested in using the formative or the semester exam, semester 1. And within high school math, it's recommended that you use your semester 1 exam. So with that information in mind, go ahead and choose the appropriate class period to start with. Once you have chosen that class, you'll see a box that says subject, and you'll want to filter to make it easier on you in the next step. So go ahead and choose math or science within this particular subject. This will pull up only those assessments that are associated with your content area, math or science. After it has populated on your screen and filtered through those different assessments, you should now see a shorter list of assessments. Now, within the different columns, you'll need to find the particular assessment, the formative assessment, the semester exam, or possibly a pre-post assessment. Find the name of that assessment and when it was given. And once you have found and identified it, click on the A+ graphic right next to the percentage. When you click on that A+ graphic, it's going to bring you to the Test Scores tab in blue, just like you see on the screen. For confidentiality reasons, I have blacked out the students' names there, but you should see your students' names listed alphabetical by last name, and then their associated achievement level score for that particular formative assessment. Now, if I wanted to, on my Ippy-Dippy, I actually could scroll down to the bottom of this screen on the Test Scores tab, and I would be able to see the district average for that assessment, the school average, as well as the class average. And that data in pre-post situation could potentially be used for your individual professional development plan. However, for this particular practice, we're interested in looking at achievement level data by benchmark. So we're going to go ahead and click on the Standards tab. Here is the Standards tab that we're going to click on. And once I click on that, we'll be able to see a different screen come up. When I click on the Standards tab, you'll see it will populate with this big drop-down list that has a variety of different standards enclosed. Depending upon the content area, science versus math, you'll want to choose the appropriate bank of standards. For example, if this was a high school science or middle school science assessment, I'd want to choose Florida Next Generation Sunshine State Standards 2008 Science. This will marry those standards to this particular assessment. Otherwise, if it was a math assessment, I'll then choose Florida Next Generation Sunshine State Standards 2007 Mathematics. Now, as a word to the wise going ahead as we progress forward with Common Core, we'll also want to keep in mind what standards are associated with which assessment. So it may be possible in the future that we're choosing something other than Next Generation Sunshine State Standards. Nonetheless, at this time, go ahead and make the appropriate selection for that in order to pull down and marry the particular benchmark standards with that assessment. When you do so, you'll see that the screen will populate and you'll now see a list of those benchmarks listed by name, and they probably will be in alphabetical order. Now, instead of seeing students' names there, you'll see those benchmarks and then the associated score listed for each one of those benchmarks. We are nearly finished with this process. We're going to make one final change on this screen. And if I look along the very top, I will see the Sort By drop-down box. It most likely says standard name at this time, but if I arrow down in that drop-down, I can change it to score. This will automatically rank those benchmarks from lowest performing to highest performing, so that way I don't have to go through and do it by hand. The computer will actually do it for us. Some teachers are interested in printing out this information to keep a data binder, which may be a good idea, and certainly you are more than welcome to do that. If you're interested in printing out this information, you can go up and click on the PDF icon that is on the top right-hand corner of the screen as showcased on your screen right now. This will open that information in a different screen as a PDF in which you have the opportunity of saving it as a PDF file or printing it if you wish. What's nice about printing it is not only do you have that graphic that has all the benchmarks ranked from lowest performing to highest performing benchmark, but below that it will also include the verbiage for each one of those benchmarks, which is very nice in terms of looking back and seeing what the benchmark covers. At this particular point, however, go ahead and take out your FCIM benchmark planning tool for FCAT or EOC prep. We're going to fill in the first three columns, that being period number, benchmark, and benchmark achievement score. We're not going to worry about suggested gizmo or resource or the scheduled for columns at this time. In short, what we're interested in doing is repeating the process that we just went through for every class period, because every class period has different students, and every class period with different students is going to have different needs for remediation. So here is a finished product, so beginning with the end in mind. In this middle school science example, the teacher has looked at every single class period that they teach science. So period 2, period 4, they also had period 5, period 6, and here is period 7. The teacher has gone through and has identified the 6 lowest performing benchmarks for each of the class periods. So ideally, if you separate it into thirds, lowest, middle, and highest, you may come up with approximately 6 to 8 benchmarks. So it's nice to start with a small, manageable allotment of benchmarks, biting off a small portion that we can work with and not get overwhelmed with. Go ahead and, as you see in the example, list the full listing of the benchmark as well as the benchmark achievement score as reported with Achievement Series. Once you've listed the 6, you'll want to go back up in Achievement Series and look for the close button in the top right hand of the screen. It'll then bring you back and you can choose different class periods to repeat this process. And of course, if needed, feel free to rewind back in the video to gain additional assistance and have me walk you through that process if you need additional support. Although before you stop the video to do that, let us first take a look at what those benchmarks mean. We'll take a look at a science example first and then a math example. So in trying to build your repertoire and your knowledge of benchmarks, the SC here is going to represent the subject, which is science. 7 is the grade level as you see, and then P is the body of knowledge. P within science is physical science. We have L for life science, E for earth science. We also have N for nature of science. And the last 2 numbers represent the big idea and the benchmark. So what runs through my mind as I am looking for resources is really 2 questions. What grade level and what big idea? And as long as I know those 2 pieces and am able to quickly read them, decipher them, I can find resources very easy. And you'll see that as we move through to explore Gizmo resources. Let's now take a look at a math example. So within this math example, we have MA for math. This happens to be a high school level benchmark, so we have 912, grade 9 through 12, as you see. The body of knowledge is A for algebra. It also could be G for geometry, D for discrete math, T for trigonometry. And then finally 2.3, you can see this is big idea 2, benchmark 3. So again, the 2 items I'm thinking inside of my head are what grade level, 9 through 12, and what big idea. This is big idea 2. Take a moment at this time, if needed, to pause or rewind the video to analyze each one of those class periods. So go back to each one of the class periods and continue to fill out the FCIM benchmark planning tool for each one of the class periods by identifying the 6 lowest performing benchmarks. Once you have that data on the actual sheet itself, take a moment to reflect, as you see on your screen, over these 3 questions. Is there a benchmark that all classes need additional support with? Which one is it, and why do you think so? Does the data support what you thought students were struggling most with? So from your experience in the classroom, is that supported or negated by the data? And finally, what are the benefits of data-driven instruction? So are there implications on your teaching practice and your profession as well as student achievement by using or not using data-driven instruction? Now would be the appropriate time to pause the video if you need additional time to go back and perform the task at hand. And as I mentioned before, when you're ready, just pick up and play to resume the video. Welcome back. So let's review the 3 things that we've done so far. We've talked about and have looked at research validation in using data to drive instruction most effectively. We've also accessed assessment data and reports within Achievement Series, and by doing that mini lesson, we've identified benchmarks in need of further remediation to strengthen students' conceptual understanding for each of those class periods. Moving forward now, let's look at Learn and Discover, ExploreLearning Gizmo resources that can easily be manipulated by teachers to put together an FCIM model or remedial activities. I'm going to recall from initial training that each of the gizmos within the catalog contain lesson materials. Now, many of the gizmos already have a student exploration sheet, an exploration sheet answer key, a teacher guide, vocabulary sheet, as well as 5 assessment questions. Some of the gizmos don't have all of these components. They only have 1 or 2 lesson materials, but every gizmo in the collection has 5 assessment questions. To start with, let's look at the teacher guide. The teacher guide captures many of the best practices that are also aligned within our classroom teacher evaluation tool. For example, the guide starts with learning objectives. Remember, the lesson overview section highlights the different activities, and if there are a variety of activities, they are built upon cognitive complexity. However, as I'm highlighting here, in the suggested lesson sequence section, there are discussion questions. These discussion questions are great to infuse as you're remediating over a particular benchmark and are great as probing questions. So feel free to take these right out of the teacher guide and use them strategically throughout the remedial or FCIM that you are going to do with your students. You also have the student exploration sheets. All the exploration sheets start with prior knowledge questions followed by a warm-up, and then they break into a variety of activities. These activities are built upon cognitive complexity, so easy, medium, hard as we move from A, B to C. You can use them standalone, which means I don't have to do activity A before B or B before C. And the other great thing about it is, in terms of critical thinking and questioning, they also increase. So I could effectively take a question from A, a question from activity B, and a question from activity C and have them scaffolded in such a way. Also remember, with each of the gizmos, when you're interacting with the gizmo, there is a copy screen and a camera snapshot feature. So possibly as you're creating activities for continuous improvement or remediation, you might modify the gizmo, take a snapshot of it, and pull it into a word processing document and actually create your own questions or activities. Certainly is a possibility in order to adapt the needs for your students. Here I am highlighting where those particular snapshot camera feature buttons are in case you've missed them. Also remember, with each of the gizmos, under the gizmo, in this example we have force and fan carts, if I scroll down the page, I'm going to find 5 assessment questions. I like these assessment questions because oftentimes they are application, true application, whereas the student needs to apply what they have learned from you through the FCIM or mini lesson or mini reteach to these different questions in order to come up with the appropriate answer. So here, for example, in question 1, they're having to look at a data set, apply the knowledge of what the question is asking, and then choose the appropriate answer. Here in number 5, this is graphical analysis. So again, applying the information of what could have happened, making sense of the situation, and coming up with the possible answer option. Remember that if students utilize and have access to the gizmos through the class code that you have given them, they can go on and log on to ExploreLearning.com and actually complete the gizmo using the student exploration sheet electronically. They can open it as a Word document and type right on it. However, also keep in mind, as I'm showcasing here with one of the students, they have the opportunity of taking those assessment questions on their own and getting instant feedback. Whether the student gets the answer correct or whether the student gets the answer incorrect, it always is going to lead the student back to the question, the possible answer options. It'll tell the student what they had put and what the correct answer is. And also, regardless if they get it correct or not, will always provide them with an explanation. Keep in mind, you as the teacher on your side of the ExploreLearning Gizmos platform can look at those assessment results for the whole entire class. Simply find the gizmo that you have assigned onto the class tab and click on the link that says Assessment Results. By clicking on that link, that will populate the report in which you can look alphabetically by student's last name and see their associated answers and score. What's nice about the shading is you can look quickly down the row at each one of those 5 questions and do a quick line item analysis. And of course, you as the teacher will have the option of looking back at the questions and the answer options for each of those questions. So to kind of wrap up, let's look at the teacher guide again. There are 2 sections that you can use for pulling resources for creating FCIMs, mini lessons, and remedial activities. The suggested lesson sequence section. This is where you can gain a variety of other ideas on how to present the concept or content to be retaught. Maybe it was the activity or the way that you taught it initially. By asking within your PLC and seeing if they have other suggestions, or by looking at the suggested lesson sequence section, you may be able to gain a different perspective on how the content could be taught. As previously mentioned in the discussion questions, you can pull those out and use them for bell work questions while remediating, to infuse throughout a reteach or a mini lesson strategically placed, or develop them into exit card or exit tickets by having students answer them before they walk out at the end of the class period. The student exploration sheet provides bell work questions as well that can be pulled out of the prior knowledge questions section. And then you have the different varying activities that can be used, whether that be in the computer lab, where you're sitting one student at one computer, or possibly pairing them up and having two students work at one computer. You also could use bits and pieces of the student exploration sheet through whole class instruction if you wish. Or in the high school level, this may be perfect for a self-guided tutorial or even as ELP, extended learning opportunity. Since students can access Gizmos both at school and at home, they don't have to be on a district computer to use it. You may also think of a variety of other ways that they could be using Gizmos to help with continuous improvement over those lower performing benchmarks. And finally is the Gizmo itself. So teacher created continuous improvement lessons through whole class instruction, possibly design challenges, discovery activities, virtual labs, pullouts, or maybe even just for a visual aid in describing and looking at a variety of models for both math and science. Classroom discussions are always very rich in using the Gizmo, since you can click and see how the Gizmo interacts, the data that it spits out or gives off after manipulating something. So there are a variety of different ways in which it could go as you manipulate and use the Gizmo as the focal point of a lesson. So at this time comes step number 4, the continuous improvement action plan. We've already identified and analyzed benchmark data and ranked them and list them in ranked order. Now would come the time to browse for Gizmos that correlate to each one of those benchmarks, explore the lesson resource materials, that being the student exploration sheet, the teacher guide, the answer key, the vocabulary sheet, and the assessment questions that follow the Gizmo, to figure out what materials might suit you best in creating these mini lessons for reteach opportunities. The other thing to consider while looking at the resources is how would this information best be presented for remediating those lower performing benchmarks. Is it through bell work? Is it through a 10 or 15 minute mini lesson? Or is it something that students just need additional support with polishing and maintaining, which could be done through self-guided activities with the usage of the student exploration sheet? Finally, it's putting that plan into action, scheduling and planning a time when those benchmarks will be retaught or reassessed. So taking a look back at that teacher example, this would be the time in which we're now going to fill in the suggested Gizmo or resource column by identifying Gizmos. One of the great things is Gizmos are already correlated to benchmarks, to our textbooks, and in many of the curriculum guides are already listed also. So there's a variety of very easy ways to find Gizmos that correlate to the benchmarks that we've identified. The final column is the scheduled for. So that might be the week of a certain block of time in which you would start to do that remediation. Here again is a closer look at that teacher example where the teacher has started to go through this process and looking at the benchmark and finding the resources. The two questions you may ask yourself again is what grade level? So in the very first row we have grade 7. And then which big idea? In this case it's big idea 10, benchmark 3. To browse for Gizmos, there are two ways that I would recommend. One is through ExploreLearning.com, where at that very top blue bar you can browse for Gizmos by academic standard, by grade level and topic, and by textbook correlation. So if you're interested in doing it that way, you can navigate your web browser to www.explorelearning.com, And you don't even have to sign in to browse for gizmos. You can just click on the Browse Gizmos button off of that top blue bar. You'll find it on the left side of that blue bar. And then choose Academic Standard. Finally, you'll choose the state of Florida. And once you choose the state of Florida, it will populate with the listing of math standards first. If you're science, you'll want to scroll down to the science section. And most likely, you'll be looking at the next generation Sunshine State standards, unless we are now at the time in which Common Core is implemented, whereas math, you'll want to look at the Common Core section. However, there are a variety of curriculum guide and resource materials already put together, and as I showcased at the very beginning, those curriculum guide and resource materials are housed on the Hillsborough ExploreLearning Gizmos resource page. Again, that web address was www.explorelearning.com/Hillsborough. Especially in the middle school science content area, you'll want to look at the curriculum guides, as well as the big idea sheets that are put together. And that way you'll look by grade level and then big idea, which is the reason it was important for us to review how to read a benchmark. So big idea can be found very easy. A gizmo can be found very easy for one of the standards by looking at the correct grade level and then within the correct big idea. The ExploreLearning Hillsborough Gizmos blog will also house materials for high school math and high school science. So again, that's another place for those particular content areas that you could look at in order to identify gizmos to help remediate over the benchmark. Let me walk you through the website just in case you need some additional help or support. So I've navigated to www.explorelearning.com. And off of that top blue bar at the top, you see there, Browse Gizmos, so I can click on that. And that will populate 3 different options on my screen. Gizmos by academic standard, Gizmos by grade and topic, or Gizmos by textbook. We're going to click on Gizmos by academic standard. When I click on Gizmos by academic standard, I'll find Florida in the top middle row. And then I'll find mathematics first. And again, I have Common Core state standards as well as next generation Sunshine state standards. Further down on the page, I'll find the science section where I have next generation Sunshine state standards. So for example, if this was a 8th grade benchmark, that would be SC.8. I'm going to go to science, next generation Sunshine state standards, and I'm going to click on 8th grade since it's an 8th grade benchmark. If it was SC.912, I'm going to click on the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards section under Science for grades 9 through 12. And again, I'll bring you back to the Hillsborough's ExploreLearning Gizmos resource page where you may be interested in clicking on the middle school science icon, high school science, or high school math for a variety of other FCAT and EOC prep resources that have been put together for you. Those include some PDF documents that have benchmarks and topics and suggested gizmos. There are also some PowerPoints already put together that have some item specification questions right out of the Florida DOE item spec books for your respective grade and topics, content areas, I shall say. And those questions are paired with gizmos that you can utilize. So you're more than welcome to those particular resources and shared gizmo lists that are available to you. We will finally look at a proposed FCIM action plan timeline. This is commonly a question that teachers have in terms of when should I remediate or how long should I remediate? So I would say to you, aside from this particular proposed action plan, you may want to consult your department head or subject area leader for their professional opinion or your content supervisor. One of the ways in which you definitely can start to improve student conceptual knowledge for these benchmarks that are lowest performing is through structured bell work activities that now are very meaningful compared to having them do busy work at the beginning of class. One of those ways is Monday by posing a question or questions to students to have them work on independently for bell work. So for the first 5 or 10 minutes, having them work on those questions. Where those questions might come from could be 2 different places. The ExploreLearning Gizmos teacher guide, which has discussion questions built in, or the ExploreLearning Gizmos student exploration sheet with the variety of activities that I could steal or take questions out of. On Tuesday, I then could pair students up and have them review their answers that they worked on Monday. But not only reviewing their answers, but additionally taking it one step further and having students work on their answers and modifying their work. This could include providing justification for their answer or reasoning, or possibly having them provide examples. I can verify their answers by looking at the teacher guide. There is a scientific or mathematical background section. So if it's a science gizmo, you'll find that scientific background section. If it's a math gizmo, you'll find a mathematical background section. Or if I took questions out of the student exploration sheets, I could then look at the student exploration sheet answer key to verify their answers. On Wednesday, after collecting and looking at those student questions from Tuesday, I could then review select questions at the beginning of class and actually provide non-examples and exemplar work from a different class period, but generated by students. And I'll do that in such a way that will look and critique the work in a very collegial manner in class. So students have the opportunity of seeing what an incomplete answer will look like as well as a full complete answer, and looking for misinformation that might be presented and also gaining clarification over that. That could lead into a mini lesson on Wednesday where I start as a teacher to utilize the gizmo to explain the content at hand. Now, certainly I'm not going to get all that done in one day, so that would continue or flow over my mini lesson or reteach opportunity into Thursday, in which I'll regain the use of the gizmo to help clarify any of the questions that students have or the areas that they're struggling with. At the end of Thursday, I will provide students with the essential question, which may come from my curriculum guide, or some sort of overarching assessment question from the gizmo that's going to help me understand whether they have improved their content knowledge for that particular benchmark and really understand. So that might actually even be teacher generated if necessary. I'll set the expectations at the end of Thursday to let students know when they come in Friday, they need to be engaged. They need to settle right on in and answer that assessment question so that they have the most amount of time to prove to me just how much they know on that content. And I pose that as a challenge to them, for them to fill as much of that paper up with the knowledge that they know. So Friday, when the student comes in, I'll provide the 5 or 10 minutes of time for them to quietly work on the essential question or the assessment question or questions that I've posed to them. Emphasizing that it can't just be a question answer, but it has to have explanation, justification, argumentation, providing examples to accompany their answers so that they can really show application of the knowledge. So there, Monday through Friday, if I designate 10 minutes each class period, I now have worked in nearly a 50-minute block to remediate over that particular benchmark. I'll use their answers that they provided me at the end of Friday to gauge whether the students have a stronger understanding of the content or not, or if I should continue to engage them on that particular benchmark to help remediate. One of the easiest ways that can be done is by using a variety of teaching strategies and tools like exit cards and such. So certainly pull together a variety of the tools and tricks in which you already have in your teacher toolbox into this process. With that, I leave you some of the best strategies, best practices for using gizmos in your teaching. And as you can see here, allowing students to control the use of the gizmo during whole class instruction, confirming students' understanding of the task at hand and monitoring their progress in class, permitting students to ask those what-if questions and utilizing the gizmo, which could provide for a teachable moment. The gizmos also have vocabulary sheets, so include that vocabulary as part of the gizmo lesson. And think outside of the box, foster inquiry and discovery, and challenge students to predict the outcomes before actually running the gizmo and showing. Those questions might be higher level thinking questions and problem solving that are scaffolded from cognitive complexity, as we've discussed. And challenge students to verbalize their thinking and share their results out loud. And I often, as a teacher, will do that too, so to help students understand my train of thought and how I've arrived from point A to point B in coming up with an explanation or an answer. The biggest piece as we move more so into Common Core with the ELA and mathematical practices is require students to support their answer with explanation, with evidence, and justification. Have students construct an argument as to why their answer is correct, and challenge them to justify their answer. With this comes great opportunities to allow students to think through writing. And of course, don't be afraid to customize the lesson materials as needed. We're not going to be able to just pull a product off the shelf and utilize it as is, but a lot of the pieces that are already developed are great pieces that we can take, make small tweaks with, and continue forward in this FCIM model. We have now reached the end of our training, so should you have any questions or would like additional assistance, please feel free to make contact with me via email or telephone. You'll see my email address there for first class, or you may use the ExploreLearning.com email address. I'd be more than happy to come out to the school site to work individually with teachers or guide this process in a professional learning community. And certainly I wish you the best in remediating over those lower performing benchmarks in preparation for FCAT, EOC, and semester exams. Thank you for participating in this particular training. Finally, if you wish to fill out an anonymous survey about the content or method of presentation, please email me at the email addresses shown on the screen, and I will provide you with that information in an email. Thank you very much for your attention and time, and I wish you a good day.